Welcome back into the Vikings Central podcast. We have a special guest here today, a man that needs no introduction. Wobby, how we doing?
I'm doing great, fellas. I appreciate you having me on. This will be a lot of fun.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course, of course. And sounds like you're the new host of the Believe in Vikings. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's that's Believe is a really cool network for any of your subscribers, listeners who don't know. There's a Believe in almost any team, and they obviously have a Believe in Vikings, and it's been a really cool show for a lot of years. Something I've watched and observed over time, and they gave me a call and said, "Hey, do you want to join Believe?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be super cool." So, really excited to be a part of it, just a small part of it, and going to keep Bryant McKinney involved. And there have been some other hosts on Believe in Vikings in the past that all of them that I hope are remain involved as well. Excited to have them back on the show and contribute. So, lots of fun, exciting stuff ahead on Believe in Vikings for sure.
good. Well, we certainly can't wait to, for the season to start and listen to you guys um, bring in the real content for Vikings football like you've been doing for the last
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, man,
About.
it's been a while. Yeah, for sure. It has been about 20. You're right, because
Yeah.
it was 15 years for me with the team, 05 to 19. And then since I left, I've kind of tried to dabble and stay in the mix a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's 20 years, and we've all seen a lot in 20 years, right, of Vikings
Right.
football. We've been through the ringer and back, that's for sure.
Which, yeah, I mean, anyone, around my age, we grew up, watching you on Vikings Entertainment Network,
Yeah.
and you basically created that. I mean, it started from almost nothing, right? And just as a writer creating the and then putting out the content for Vikings. What did if you could get into that a little bit, like how
Yeah.
did that kind of stem and
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing that up and mentioning it, because it did start really small, guys. I mean, I was a writer. They needed an intern to write for Vikings.com, and I would get in there and write a few articles a week. I mean, think about that. You know what some of these sites put out now. They put out a few articles in the middle of a practice. They put out a few articles. And it blossomed into the Vikings Entertainment Network, and there's so many different ways we could describe that to illustrate the growth. But I think the best way to really maybe visualize it is in Winter Park in Eden Prairie, they used to have a racquetball court in between two of the weight rooms. And eventually, players and staff stopped playing racquetball, and the Vikings wanted to build a studio. So we shoehorned a small studio where the racquetball court used to be at Winter Park. And you juxtapose that with what we did when we opened TCO Performance Center in 2016. It's like a $5+ million studio that doubles as the team meeting room with theater seating, and what a growth period, for the revenue generating side of the business there, for the content side of the business. And it was really fun to be a part of it. And I appreciate you saying that I built it or helped build it. There are so many people involved in that, behind the scenes, behind the camera, editors, shooters, strategists, people who know the technology, and a lot of people involved over the years. And they're still kicking tail at Vikings Entertainment Network. They produce great content. They're constantly trying to come up with what can be a differentiator for us, because everyone is capable now, and everyone's got technology and is producing great digital content. And I think the Vikings do a great job of figuring out, like, what are our advantages? How can we be different? And everyone's trying to find their way in this game, in this saturated marketplace. But I think the Vikings have consistently been very good at evolving and coming up with new things. Not everything works. I was there. We tried stuff that was terrible, right? But I mean, you can't be afraid to fail, and they're not. So a lot of respect for them. A lot of my friends are still there. Definitely miss those guys,
Yeah.
and do enjoy watching their work still.
So that's interesting you say that some of the stuff was terrible. You have it off the cusp example of something that just didn't work out for you?
Oh man, we had it was my idea too. It was called it was called Off the Cuff, maybe. And I got this from, did you guys ever watch Pardon the Interruption on ESPN? It's still
Oh,
on.
of course.
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
So there was a period of time during Pardon the Interruption where they would do a segment and go to commercial. Okay. And in the middle of like a 4-minute commercial break, for like 15 seconds, they would go to the studio and they'd show Wilbon and Kornheiser and the producers and the camera guys like joking around with each other. Right. And I thought that was good. It gave viewers like a little behind the scenes look at stuff, and it humanized the whole production. Right. And so I'm like, we should try and do that with like when we're filming a TV show, like in between segments, like have the camera like stay on and like film some stuff of what we're saying, you know, and we called it Off the Cuff, and it never was good. Like all my friends, you know, the guys are like, yeah, great idea, you know, and like we're trying to make it work, and no one ever says anything funny when we leave the cameras rolling, and it just wasn't great, you know. And that was, you know, my idea. I had some good ones, more bad ones than good ones.
Well, I think we can all agree on that.
Well, I think that the idea was great. I just think the execution was a little off on your guys' end.
And I remember another one too is really early on in the NFL honors days where they had the award show the week of the Super Bowl, a couple of nights before the Super Bowl. And at that time, I think this was 2012. After the 2012 season, which of course Adrian Peterson came back from the ACL and was the MVP and the rushing leader. And but at that time we didn't know who the MVP was. We had made the playoffs but lost in the first round, so our season was over. They're having the awards show a couple of days before the Super Bowl, and you're constantly figuring out, what are we going to budget for? Where are we going to go? We're definitely going to the combine. We're definitely going to owners meetings. We're definitely doing this. We probably can't do that. We probably can't do this. And so NFL honors came up, and we ended up choosing not to budget to go to NFL honors. And what do you know? Adrian Peterson wins MVP, right? So we have my boss when I was with the Vikings, Brian Harper, is there, and you know, in a working capacity, not for the Vikings Entertainment Network, but just as an executive with the club. And he's like filming Adrian Peterson like winning the MVP award on his phone, and like, you know, like text videoing us, you know, here's our running back winning MVP on my boss's cell phone, and we're trying to get that video on the website, man. It's we made a huge deal of Donovan McNabb putting his helmet on for the first time at training camp. You know, keep the camera on number 5. As soon as he puts a Vikings helmet on, record that. We're going to tweet that. I mean, we thought that'd be a huge deal, and we all know what happened with McNabb. So lots of examples like that are funny. You look back on them, and in the moment, like, you're stressed out and heated, but right now you look back on it, you just laugh at yourself, you know?
God, those are such good stories. And I mean, this is the type of stuff, like, you know, that I think people really want to actually know about your time, like a little bit behind the scenes stuff that we don't all get to hear about. I mean, yeah, Vikings content is awesome, and we're all entrenched in training camp right now. I mean, you've been through your fair share of training camps. That's there's no doubt about that. I mean, I think you started in the Tice era.
Yeah, 05. Tice's last year. Yep.
And then Tice went to Childress.
Yep.
To Frazier.
Yep.
And then Zimmer. And
yep.
so so you left right before O'Connell then.
Yes, 19 was my last year, which was still Zim, and I think O'Connell was 22. So 22. Zim was done after 21. So was Rick. I was with Rick that whole time too, except 05 was Fran Foley, the Triangle of Authority, or 06 maybe was Fran Foley, and then Rick came in 7, perhaps. Yeah. So, yeah, you know, and Red McCombs in 05, and like Red McCombs was just selling it to the Wilfs. So that was one of my first press conferences, was the Wilfs buying the team. And yeah, just a lot of changes, you know.
We're all just thankful he didn't move. We were just thankful he didn't move us to Texas.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of rumors back then.
Yes, you're right. It was. I mean, I remember the Twins were going to go to Carolina, the Vikings were going to go to San Antonio. Yeah, you know, and now look, they both play in beautiful buildings now.
That's right. Now, I mean, out of all those eras, does one of them stand out to you more than another? Like, whatever it may be, colorfulness or team camaraderie, or go for it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the middle stages of Childress they stand out. We got pretty good in 08 with the run defense in the Williams Wall, and then we traded for Jared Allen. Adrian was clearly a star. And then the Favre situation at the beginning of 09, it became very clear that we weren't going to be able to make it work with Sage. And no disrespect to Sage, who's I love Sage and he's a great guy. But I remember we had a preseason game against the Colts, and it's like, this is just, we need something else. Tavares and Sage, we can't do it. We have a great team right here, and we just need something different, and Favre, then that next week came, and we were the first ones to interview him at the Vikings Entertainment Network. And then that magical season that in a parallel universe somewhere ended with a Ryan Longwell field goal over the Saints in the NFC title game. And then we went and beat the Colts in the Super Bowl. Somewhere that happened.
Yeah, definitely.
But so that stands out.
In the multiverse.
Yes, exactly. So that's definitely a period of time that stands out. And then the other one was Zim, who I'm still really close with. I went down and saw him in Dallas this summer, actually this spring during the draft. I was down there, and I got really close with him and went to the ranch and got to know his family really well, and just remain close with him now. So that sort of really stands out. And I really came into my own as a member of the organization, someone who was trusted, someone who could, without abusing power, I could walk around to places and get information and be productive and produce great content at that beautiful new facility, and had the trust of the coaches and Rick. So that era really stands out to me, sort of that, just the last part of my career there. And, a lot of changes in my personal life during all of that, where I was a college graduate in 05 and 06 and going through and starting a family and trying to pull off an NFL career at the same time. And, it's crazy. But the two eras specifically that really stand out was the 09 season, and then probably that 17 NFC Championship game loss with Zim into the Cousins era. That really is a profound, memory for me as well.
Yeah. I just had visions of you and Zim and probably Chris Thomason hanging out on Zimmer's ranch.
Yeah, Thomason, you know what? He would have had a good time there. Yeah.
I feel like he would have been target practice for Zim.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a good visual there, and not so much with Thomason. That's funny, but I mean, because I'm the content guy. Zim being the head coach, Shugs would come to the ranch with us. I would go with those guys. We'd have Bob, my really close friend, Bob Hagan, who was the lead of PR, director of PR there. And, you're there at the ranch, and we went there to produce a little bit of content and to do PA's radio show from there. But it was really about bonding. It was about getting away, just being real with each other, talking smart, so that when you were in the fire during the season and everyone was stressed out, worried about getting fired, worrying about what was being said about them, you had that foundational bonding from the prior summer where you were, driving four-wheelers and shooting clay pigeons, and Zim's cooking chorizo breakfast burritos for you on his, so like at the end of the day, you have that, right? And that lasts a lot longer than an NFL career or than a really awesome season. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that we didn't really love football and really get into it. We did. We just knew that wasn't forever, but those relationships are. And that's a great part about sport and about being a part of a team.
That's incredible.
That's really cool, that you're still close with Zimmer. At the end of his tenure, I feel like he got a bad rap a little bit. But in my opinion, he's the second best head coach in franchise history behind Bud Grant. Maybe that's a hot take, but I look at it at it like that. So,
well, I think you could really build a compelling argument for that, and I would agree with you. And you know what, Zim, like Leslie, or as Leslie did, as Brad did. I mean, Zim went through a cycle that happens to coaches, and it's one of those weird deals. I mean, Bill Belichick got fired, guys.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, you're getting fired. If you're a coach, you're getting fired. I mean, and it's really rare. I mean, Pete Carroll kind of got forced out. So it's a natural part of that. And that's why when you can make friends and meaningful relationships while you're doing it, it's good to do that, because that will last longer than your job will last there. I'm not the first one or only one to have figured that out. I mean, I learned that from other people there, so
sure.
it's definitely a fraternity. It's definitely relationships last, and some relationships get burned in there, right? I mean, you got power struggles and finger pointing, that can happen too. But to be uninvolved in that side of it is smart. When you can avoid that, you should avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a head coach, you get fired, or you coach for the Steelers and eventually you just retire.
Yeah, the Steelers are both the only ones, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, you brought up the fact that sometimes you burn relationships here and there.
Yeah.
Is there a time maybe that you broke a story or something that a player or coach didn't take too kindly to? That you can think of offhand?
I can think of one example. It wasn't about breaking a story or about getting something first. We really, Rick Spielman, and the content side for a short period. I don't want to say we butted heads because we were just the content people. Like Rick was the boss. So there was no like exchange of ideas. It was Rick saying, this is how it's going to go.
Sure.
But at first when this whole thing was really getting going and going fast, it was like, we want to be first and to report this news. And we had an inherent advantage being the team. I mean, I knew about the Jared Allen trade the night before it happened, but I had to sit on my hands on it, right? I couldn't say anything because, we had to make it official. The Chiefs had to sign off on it. Jared had to pass his physical. Like you just can't report it like Adam Schefter can, right? So we really had to learn, like, as a content team, okay, we got to get off this idea of being first and breaking news. And instead of focusing on being first, we got to be the best. And how do we get to be the best? Well, we can't tell you who we think we're going to draft, but as soon as we draft someone, we're going to be in the Wilf's private plane going to pick the guy up, and we're going to have the first footage of him wearing a Vikings hat on the Wilf's plane. Right. So we had to shift that. We had to shift our goal from being first breaking news to being the best and having exclusive news. So, but to answer your question, the only time I really got into a spat that kind of made me like get the shakes or like made me a little nervous, it was actually, you won't even believe this, it was with Ben Lieber,
really?
Who is one of my friends right now. And it was early on in his career, and he took exception. I made a mistake. I was getting the Will and the Sam linebacker mixed up between him and Greenway, and I was getting a little too sharp in my analysis and criticism. I was wrong, but I didn't know I was wrong, and Lieber took exception. And at this point, we weren't like close or tight like we are now, because Lieber retired and then was a part of the Vikings Entertainment Network. And it's like, yeah, I covered you when you were with the team. Now you're my coworker, And so at this time, it was just player and an employee, and he really took exception to it. I will say, I describe it as really my only tiff, and I was like shaking by it, not because he treated me disrespectfully. He actually did it in a really respectful, proper way. It was on a player's day off on a Tuesday at Winter Park. He was in there getting treatment. I was going through the locker room to get coffee from the equipment room, and he pulled me over and like almost like a stern talking to, like like your dad doesn't raise his voice at you, but you can tell he's disappointed, and like that's what it was, And so he told me why I was wrong, and then educated me on how it was really. And from that point forward, we were fine. And that's awesome. Really the only thing. And what I learned is, yes, I know some X's and O's. I can talk scheme. I can talk shop. I can use the right words. But I didn't play Division I, 2, or 3 college football. I'm not a coach. I'm not a pro player. There's just a point where you got to stop on the Sam, Mike, Will, X's, O's, zone dog. Like, you just don't quite know it unless you're in the meeting room on a Thursday going over red zone drills, right? So that's really what I learned from that. And then I just really appreciated the way Ben handled it as a player. He could have totally ripped my head off and told Childress on me, and I could have been out, That was really the only confrontation I ever had with a player.
We love Ben Lieber on Vikings Entertainment Network now. He's fantastic, and I'm glad that he's part of the organization still.
Oh, he's great.
That definitely was not pass interference in 2009 either. So,
amen. Amen to that, brother.
I will never forget that. I was at the divisional game against the Cowboys. And
wasn't that a party?
That was a party. That was the loudest I've ever heard a stadium in my entire life.
That was a party. Yeah.
It was insane. Yeah. But yeah, those kind of memories. I mean, you obviously Minnesota kid, you grew up in Minnesota, grew up a Vikings fan. On planet Earth, did you ever foresee it blossoming into what it's become today? And
I don't think you could ever foresee that, because I mean, you guys are the same as I am. You grew up watching it, and there just are things about it that I mean, you guys think of it this way probably because you're really into it. You're intellectual. You're able to think critically. It wasn't just watching Sports Center highlights for us and watching the game on Sundays. Like you thought about it on Monday, the day after the game, right? And then on Friday, you wondered, like, I wonder how we're going to handle red zone. I wonder what the red zone plan, like, so when you have that mindset of it and you're just a little bit further, you're a little bit more advanced and refined in the way you think about the game, just because you're so passionate and obsessed with it, like we are, the three of us are. When you then get out of college and you get to be inside the ropes and inside the walls of a facility, it's kid in a candy shop, man. I mean, you're constantly learning and you're wide-eyed. And yeah, I guess you probably get a little spoiled and you get desensitized to some things. But you still get in there every day and you're like, I can't believe I'm here and I'm doing this. And it's not the starstruck thing. Like I want their autographs and stuff. It's just like, I was passionate about this for the first like 22 years of my life. And now I'm inside of it right now, so yeah, it was really cool. It was a great run for me for 15 years. And my time was up. I definitely had to move on and let someone else have a turn. I just, you can only be in so many places at once. I can't coach my son's basketball team if I'm flying to Detroit on a random Saturday, and I look at what I've done since I left, like coach my son's basketball team. And I can't imagine not done those things.
Sure.
Instead of going to Detroit for the 19th time to watch us beat the Lions by 17,
Right. And I mean, you created, you and everyone else, you created this beautiful thing, and now it's time for others to take it over and make it into what it's become so far and what it will continue to evolve into. I did want to ask you a little bit, because I don't want to take up too much of your time real quick, but as outsiders looking in who don't know him personally, there's Paul Allen really got some notoriety in the last couple of years with some of his calls, and he got recognition in our minds that he's always deserved because he's always been that guy. What is he like off the mic? And I mean, like you hung out with him in Zimmer's Ranch. Talk to us a little bit about PA and what makes him tick.
Well, that's a cool question. And I think it's really cool when in your life, we all know a lot, people. Okay. And some people, everyone's unique and special, but there are some people who are just one of one, right? And it's like, I think one way to measure like how cool your life can be is like, how many of those people do you have in your life? I mentioned my friend Bob Hagan. I mean, he's like that. He was the director of PR for the Vikings for over 30 years. He's still there as a consultant. I've learned so much from him, professionally, but also just personally in my personal life. He's one of one to me. Paul is one of one. I mean, if you know Paul, you don't know anyone else like him. He's not like anyone else. So we could talk about this for a long time. And I know him on a personal level. He's the godfather to one of my daughters. So obviously we were still close, and his girlfriend, Lisa, is great. And I know his two kids, they're awesome. But you asked what makes him tick or what makes him unique. And I think back to on a personal or on a professional level, he is obsessed with being prepared and with adding something that most other broadcasters wouldn't think to add. And so when I sat between PA and Bursich for all the games on the radio, and that's another story about how that started. We can talk about that one later. So I would sit between them, and I did the best I could to point at the right number so he knew how far that run was, or to point at the screen for Burstich so he could see Hutchinson with a great block on, Cam Jordan, right? But at the end of the day, those two guys, especially PA, he poured over notes and depth charts and media guides and internet reports so that when the game was happening and he was calling it, he was not thinking, he was not looking at his notes, he wasn't relying on me to help him, even though I was ready. He knew it. He had his material prepared. He had a plan, just like a coach has for a game. He's like, this is how I'm going to open the game. When Aaron Rodgers runs onto the field the year after he was injured by Anthony Barr at US Bank Stadium, this is what I'm going to say. And it was almost like a short story or a short book. And it wasn't about what's his completion percentage, how many touchdowns does he have compared to interceptions, and what's his record at the Metrodome compared to US. It wasn't that. He would tell a story. So I really was impressed with his preparation and his drive to come up with a unique angle that would be entertaining and that would resonate with the listener. And that is really what it's about. It's not about his quirky nature. It's not about his mannerisms when he's on camera in the press box or in the booth. It's really about his preparation and his wealth of experience and knowledge over 20 years of doing this, where he's developed relationships with Norv Turner and Kevin Stefanski and Jonathan Gannon in Arizona and all of these guys that he can continue to rely on right now, so that when a big call comes up in a game, he's got something he can draw from without even thinking about it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite ever PA call, and why is it Favre to Greg Lewis against the Niners?
That's a good one. That's definitely a good one. Man, a favorite call of his.
It's like impossible question. I know.
I mean, the Miracle's good.
Yeah.
I know which one's entrenched in my head. It's the McCown,
Arizona. Yeah.
McCown.
And I wasn't
Nate
with
Boyle.
them then. That's a good one. I wasn't with them then.
Yeah.
Man, I don't. There's so many good ones. I can't pull one out right there.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, yeah, it's hard to just off the cusp. And I took the best one of all, Favre to Greg Lewis in that back of the end zone to beat the Niners. Real funny. I was studying abroad in Australia during that game, and I was streaming it on my computer. Watched it. It was the middle of the night in Australia. I screamed so loud I woke up the entire dorm room.
Awesome.
After that play, that's
awesome.
But yeah, so I'll never forget that one. All right. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. We haven't even talked about the Vikings this year. So what can you give us? What are your hopes for the year versus and what are you seeing out of JJ McCarthy, especially? Like, give us your quick rundown.
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here doing this with you. It's a fun chat. So awesome. It's a lot of fun. I could do it all night long. I was with my son playing NCAA 25 the other morning, and I thought it was 1 a.m. and I looked at the clock. It was 4:30 a.m. and we were just having a blast, and that's what we could do probably. The three of us could probably do that right now talking Vikings. So this is a lot of fun. Yes. I appreciate you having me. I think we start at the quarterback. When you think about the season 2024, you can't help but think about, is it Darnold and McCarthy and why? And I was doing a radio spot earlier today, and the two quarterbacks that I threw out there as examples of how to bring a quarterback along they were Aaron Rodgers and CJ Stroud. Now, I think that's about as opposite an upbringing as you could have, don't you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Rodgers comes in with behind Favre with McCarthy, very refined, sophisticated, storied franchise, sophisticated offense. And then CJ Stroud comes in, new head coach, a team not in disarray, but not the Packers, right? And they both succeeded wildly. So there's not one way to do it. I think what you need to do is figure out what's the right way for your guy. And the only ones who really know that are the people in the building. We don't know that. We can guess based on what we see. We can guess or we can surmise what we would do if we were there. But there are just things we don't know because we're not there. And so I can't wait for Kevin O'Connell to decide is he going to take the CJ Stroud route with JJ McCarthy or the Aaron Rodgers light route? I mean, he's not going to sit for 4 years, but for one season, is he going to sit and watch? And I think, the key part about this is you only get one shot to do it, because if you play him right away, guys, but then you got to pull back on it after 3 or 4 or 5 games, I think that is potentially detrimental to him.
Yeah.
So that's not saying you shouldn't play him right away. It's just saying it can't be a close race. Right. And then you give it to McCarthy. It's got to be by a mile. McCarthy gives us a better chance to win. And I think McCarthy's doing his job to get there, but Darnold is also equally doing a good job. And I think if it's equal or close, you got to go with Darnold. Either way, the Vikings have a brutal start to the season. I mean, the game that you feel the most confident about is another team's home opener. That's the Giants.
Yep.
And, the rest of the games before the bye are tough, man. So I'm not down or pessimistic on the Vikings. I just recognize where they're at relative to the rest of the division. And this new window that they're in with O'Connell and McCarthy, they're at the very baby stages of this. And I just think we got to remember that, not lower the expectations, but just have that in mind for when they stumble, knowing that better days are ahead. There's you only get one chance at this development with McCarthy. So you just got to be sure about what you're doing. I think there's a lot of other really interesting things to talk about with this team and the roster that I'd love to talk with you guys about. The cornerback situation, I think, is really interesting. I love the Vikings safeties. I love Brian Flores. I have concerns about the interior O-line and D-line. All those things I think are awesome to talk about. But it's hard not to start with the quarterback,
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you guys think? I mean, are you feeling McCarthy? Are you feeling Darnold? I mean, do you have a strong opinion on it yet? Because I have a feeling that O'Connell doesn't really know yet.
I think he doesn't know also, but I think he went into it with full intention of McCarthy not starting the season.
Same.
And I think he's shocked him. Like, maybe not shocked him, but he's definitely come out of the gates and been like, oh, we might have something more than we even thought we had. Because I don't know how much or have the inside track on it. I've heard from multiple people that they made a heavy play with New England to try to get up for Drake May.
I believe that's right. Yep.
Yeah. And so the fact that, they landed on McCarthy and maybe now they're like, oh, this is even better than we could have imagined, and still kept the first round pick and got Dallas Turner out of the deal. I mean, I'm super optimistic about the team going forward. I think they're doing everything right now. And I totally agree with you. Like, understand it's baby steps. And this is the very early stages of the process, and not to sound like a 76ers fan, but trust the process.
Yeah.
But to your point, interior O-line, interior D-line, very concerned about, have been as a trench player my whole life through high school and college. I do feel like that's the heartbeat of the team. You have to be solid on both the interior sides of the ball. I mean, look at every team that wins the Super Bowl is able to bring pressure up the middle, bring pressure with 4. I mean, it starts there. And I think not landing Christian Wilkins was a little bit tough for the team going into this year, because they're I think banking on that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, what he got from Las Vegas, it's I mean, you can't pay him that, but still.
Yep.
I totally agree with you.
It's just not a fun place to be deficient, because it's a street fight down there, man. It's hand-to-hand combat. And if you're losing there, there's a chance you're going to lose in some other places because you lost there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have to compensate for it somehow, some way.
Yeah. Yep. It's interesting. I actually, I think Dalton Reisner, in a vacuum, if you had to win one game season, got to win the game, I would play Reisner at right guard over Ingram. But I think Reisner over a 17-game season has more value for you as your 6th lineman than he does as an upgrade over Ingram. So that's a really intricate sort of situation that football fans that are real fans think about and recognize. You know, it's not as simple as the 5 best guys.
Yep.
It's the unit that's the best over 17 games. And I think that group is better if they can have Reisner on call to come in for anyone who's hurt or anyone who's just not playing well that day. He's more valuable in that role than he is as a 19% upgrade over Ed Ingram at a starting spot.
Sure. And I think when you look at Ed Ingram film, there's times where you're like, oh, this has got to be a top 10 guard in the league. This guy's incredible. And then but the downs are so down that it's like, what? And if you can find, because the talent, the strength, the speed is there for him. And if he could put it together, along with coaching and take it seriously and put it all together for a season, I do believe he could be a dominant guard in the league. I think it's all there for him. He just hasn't put it together yet.
Yeah. So here's another one I'd love to get both your guys' thoughts on too.
Sure.
You know, this cornerback room that they have right now. I mean, I feel like 2 months ago, it was like, we've got 2 vets. We got Shaq Griffin and Byron Murphy, and they're going to bring this room along. And we got a bunch of developmental guys, and, you know, we got a bunch of lottery tickets. And we just need like 2 of them to work out, right? And then you get, obviously, the tragic death of Kyrie Jackson, and you get the season-ending injury to Mekhi Blackman. Now Shaq Griffin is hurt. So you scramble. You sign Fabian Moreau. You sign Bobby McCain. You bring Duke Shelley back. So I think it's literally been shape-shifted from this developmental room with 2 veterans leading the way to a veteran room where we're just going to get by here for this season. We will give it a makeover in 2025 offseason, but we got to go right now. Yeah. So we're going to sign these veterans, get them in here to play. And I think they're all going to make the team, those veterans, and they're all going to play. And I don't know if this factored in or not for the Vikings brass, but I like this approach because I think they have a better pass rush now than they did a year ago. Even though Hunter's gone, I think it's a net positive with Van Ginkel and Grenard. And I think their safeties kick ass. I mean, with Metellus, Bynum, Harry, Jay Ward, Theo Jackson, like those guys, that's nice. So I think that cornerback room is insulated with a pass rush and with a secondary or with a safety room. So that's why I kind of like this approach, and challenge me on that if you see it a different way. But that's sort of what I think the approach is for the team.
Yeah, I think you got it right. I mean, it's crazy how much can change in like a matter of like 6 weeks. Like,
yeah,
like you said, it was almost a strength coming in. You had your veterans, you had your young core.
Yeah.
And now it's just kind of a bunch of new
patchwork.
faces. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Patchwork. And you can kind of tell that Flores also like really pounds the table for versatility, because like Bobby McCain, he can play the corner, he can play safety. I mean, that's why Cam's there, Cam Bynum, he played corner in college. And now they're messing with Jay Ward a little bit, you know, getting some snaps at the cornerback position. So yeah, it's really intriguing. It's going to be fun to watch play out. But it is crazy how much of a patchwork approach it is right now. But like you said, it's not the worst thing, because that safety group is so damn talented. And then the edge rusher group with Grenard, Van Ginkel, and then, you know, Dallas Turner as well. Rookies coming off the edge. So yeah, it's fun. I think Brian Flores is going to make it work, but it's crazy how much has changed in the matter of 4 to 6 weeks. So
yeah, I won't necessarily challenge you, because for the most part I kind of agree. What I will say is the one thing, no matter how versatile you are with your secondary, it's not like you can put Josh Metellus on CeeDee Lamb. Not even for a play one-on-one. So you do limit yourself when it comes to one-on-ones. And that's where the pass rush comes into play, because a cornerback's best friend is pass rush. And if you can bring the heat, especially with 4, and play a little zone, maybe man zone behind it, then you can still have success. But there is going to have to be some compensation work done, because as Mike Zimmer always alludes to, corners get hurt all the time. So we're going into the season based on that we have what we have now, but we're going to have injuries in the secondary. There's always injuries in the secondary. So you're still going to need depth and people to come up and step up and play those roles. So, but I mean, the super awesome thing is we're freaking blessed to have the defensive coordinator we have, because he's open-minded and super creative and isn't afraid to try anything, even on game day.
Yep, that's right. I think those are good traits to have. And he comes from the Belichick tree. And we only played New England like 4 times in my 15 years with the Vikings. But it's like we would, as like broadcasters and content people, I mean, we'd try and get ready for the team we're playing, you know, and it's like, I don't even know on PA's depth chart to make them a 30 front or a 40 front in New England. Like, I didn't even know what they were. It's like, it depends what game you watch. You know what I mean? And it's so antithetical to what I was brought up in, because it was like under Brad, Leslie was a D coordinator. Then Leslie was a head coach, and it was 4-man front, stacked linebackers, Tampa 2 every year, every game, every year, after year, after year. And then you're getting ready for someone like Belichick, and it's like, I don't even know what the heck these guys are. I don't even know how many down linemen they're going to have today, you know, and so both are good. You can, I mean, one of the more like predictable, bland coordinators of all time was Monty Kiffin, the late great Monty Kiffin, who's a legendary coach and built one of the best defenses of all time, you know, and he was static and predictable. So you can win doing it that way. It's just not how Belichick rolls, Saban rolls. They don't roll that way. And that's the tree that Flores comes from. And that creativity, you said it, creativity, open-mindedness, not afraid to try stuff, not afraid to, you know, bend the rules a little bit. I think that's going to benefit the Vikings this season, because a lot of their players, their number one trait is their versatility.
Yeah, most definitely. Overall, as always, super excited for the upcoming season. Whatever it may bring. I mean, I think it's a win-win season for the Vikings, no matter what. Like, even if they do happen to have a down year, it's, you know, you end up with a good draft pick, and you go into next year with a sophomore quarterback and a super talented team, and the excitement will be even heavier. So
I agree. I would say if it turns into one of those seasons, guys, where like you got to take your lumps, it's just important, and O'Connell knows this better than I do, but it's just important that he doesn't get out of body and try to overcorrect it. Just be who you are, be okay with that, know where you're at in your arc, and know that better days are coming, and establishing that identity and making it clear to everyone that this is how we're doing it, I think is really important this year. And they have this sort of grace year to do that with a rookie quarterback, right? So use that to your advantage, and really, and they might win a bunch of games this year. I'm not counting them out, but really gear up for next season.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we've definitely taken up a lot of your evening, and
oh man, it's been fun. Appreciate it.
For sure.
And we can't thank you enough for coming on. Grew up watching you and following you on Vikings Entertainment Network. So you have the dream job of many people who are going to be watching this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, honestly, it's fun to do this with you guys, and I hope we can do it again. You know, I love the idea exchange. I love, you know, finding common ground with people, and then I love, you know, challenging opinions. So let's have a part 2 here as soon as we can, and you know, maybe before the season starts or right when we're starting the season, let's see if our opinions change and how we're feeling about stuff. That'd be a lot of fun.
Sir. Most definitely.
All right, fellas.
Thanks,
Wobby.
Yep.